What if I told you that even if a fetus has a right to life, abortion is still morally justifiable? Sounds contradictory, right? Even if it's a person, even if it has rights, even then it is still okay to get an abortion. This isn't just a hot take to get a reaction, it's actually the foundation of one of the most famous, controversial, and misunderstood arguments in the entire abortion debate. And it's called the Violinist Argument. And hearing it makes you look at the abortion debate in a very different way. Okay, let's all take a collective deep breath here. The abortion debate is very messy. It's emotional, it's political, moral, and incredibly personal. So instead of diving straight into opinions, I want to introduce you to a thought experiment. And this isn't a slogan, it's not a debate stage zinger, it's a real brain-bending philosophical scenario created by philosopher Judith Jarvis Thomson. She's a very well-known moral philosopher of the 20th century. And you've actually probably heard of her already, even if you don't realize it. She's the mind behind the infamous trolley problem. You know, the one where a runaway trolley is about to kill 5 people, but if you pull a lever, you divert it and only 1 person dies instead. Yeah, that one. I just essentially gave you guys ethical chaos in like a single sentence. But today we are not pulling any levers. Instead, we're gonna wake up in a hospital bed, physically connected to a stranger. So here's the situation. Imagine this. You wake up one morning feeling groggy and a little in pain. You look around and see that you're in a hospital. Then you realize that you're lying back to back with someone. Actually, you're hooked up to them, literally connected. A doctor walks in and says, "Don't panic, you've been kidnapped." Because obviously that's not cause for panic. Anyways, it turns out that the person you're connected to is a world famous violinist. Why a violinist? I literally have no idea, but maybe philosophers have a thing for classical music. He has a rare fatal kidney disease, and after searching the entire country, a group called the Society of Music Lovers found that only you were the compatible match to him. So they took matters into their own hands. They kidnapped you in the middle of the night, plugged your kidneys into his bloodstream, and now your body is filtering his blood. But here's the catch. If you stay connected for 9 months, he will recover and survive. But if you unplug yourself now, or at any point within the 9 months, he will die. So here is the moral question. Are you obligated to stay hooked up to this man to save his life? Take a second to really think about it, because this is not just some weird, highly unlikely scenario. This is the framework for Thomson's argument about abortion. Are you obligated to save him, or are you simply allowed to walk away even if it means his death? Thomson says that you are allowed to walk away. She argues that just because someone has a right to life, it does not mean that they have the right to use your body to stay alive. Let me say that again, but differently. Having a right to life does not equate to having the right to use someone else's body. And this is the crux of her defense of abortion. So how does this violinist situation connect to abortion then? Well, Thomson is granting something that many pro-choice advocates either avoid or don't grant at all. She's saying, let's assume the fetus is a person. Let's assume it has a right to life. And then she concludes that, even then, abortion may still be morally okay. Because just like the violinist doesn't have the right to use your kidneys, the fetus does not have the right to use the pregnant woman's body. She isn't saying the fetus isn't human or that it's not alive. She instead is asking, what does the right to life actually give you access to? Now, let's make this even more real, because honestly, being kidnapped and hooked up to a violinist is a bit out there. Let's say I have a child, and my child desperately needs a kidney. I'm the only match. Legally, no one can force me to donate. It would be a selfless act if I did, and some may even argue that I should do it morally. But the law does not require it. Now pause. You might be thinking, wait, weren't we just talking about morality? How did we suddenly jump into what's legal? And that's a good question, and here's the answer. Morality and legality aren't the same thing, but they are deeply connected. Sometimes the law reflects our moral beliefs. Sometimes it protects individual rights, even when it clashes with popular moral expectations. So I am bringing in the legal side here to show something crucial. Even in the eyes of the law, your body is considered inviolable. You cannot be forced to undergo surgery or give up an organ, and it doesn't matter if someone else dies as a result of your inaction. And it doesn't matter your relationship to the dying person, whether it's a random person on the street or your own flesh and blood. The law doesn't protect bodily autonomy because it's the moral thing to do, although in many cases people will argue that it is. but also because it's considered a foundational right, legally and ethically. So then, why is pregnancy any different? Why do we expect women to give up full bodily autonomy, sometimes for 9 months, often with medical risks, when we don't require a similar sacrifice to save people who have already been born? It's a question worth considering. Now, look, I know that this is not a perfect analogy. I'm not saying it is. Pregnancy isn't the same as being kidnapped and hooked up to a stranger. There's the fact that in many cases, sex was consensual, even if the pregnancy was not planned. Thomson knows this, and she actually brings it up. She says this isn't a perfect analogy for all abortions, just some, especially the ones involving coercion or extreme risk to the woman's health. But even for other cases, she pushes the idea that consent to sex is not necessarily consent to pregnancy, or in other words, consent to the fetus using a woman's body and violating her bodily autonomy against the woman's wishes. Just like opening your windows in the summer doesn't mean you consent to a burglar entering your house, even if you know that's a risk. And yes, this line of argument frustrates a lot of people, partially because it feels abstract and cold, but also because it does not give us a perfect answer. And Judith Thomson admits that in her essay. She highlights that her answer does not give a general yes or a general no, that abortion is not always morally permissible, and she gives us examples. Her argument does support the idea that a sick and desperately frightened 14-year-old girl pregnant due to may choose abortion, and any law that rules this out is, according to her, insane. She then continues and points out that abortion can be seen as indecent, and she says that if a woman were to want an abortion at 7 months merely to avoid the nuisance of postponing a trip abroad, that would be indecent. These are two very extreme examples, but nonetheless, she is trying to highlight that there is nuance to the abortion debate. The thing is, this is why the argument is so famous, because it cuts to the core of how we think about bodily rights, moral obligations, and what we owe to other people, even when it costs us. It forces us into an uncomfortable position where the answer isn't black and white, which is something we all really wish it was. So now, after all of that, I want to hear from you guys. Does the violinist argument hold up? Is it a brilliant defense of bodily autonomy, or does it miss something important about pregnancy, responsibility, or personhood? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Seriously, I want to know what you guys think. And in the next video, I'll break down the biggest criticisms of this argument, the ones that say the analogy is flawed, the logic breaks down, and the moral comparison doesn't hold. But for now, just sit with this question. What do we really mean when we say someone has a right to life? Because sometimes it's not about the answer, it's about asking the question in a way that's never been asked before. And in the meantime, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next episode.